Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Bernie Sanders is running for president again, not that he ever really stopped. Sanders announced his second campaign this morning in a 10-minute video. Before you drop everything and watch it, take half a moment to appreciate just how much America and the Democratic Party have changed over the past 4 years. Pull up Sanders' first presidential announcement speech. It was May 26, 2015 in Burlington, Vermont. Sanders looked a lot different then. But the second thing you'll notice if you watch it is how familiar his words sound. It's spooky. Virtually all of the themes in Sanders' announcement speech, his first one, are what in the end got Donald Trump elected president. The collapse of the middle class, the crushing cost of health care and student loans, the pointlessness of perpetual war in the Middle East, the distorting effect of Washington lobbyists and donors, the swamp, the dangers of corporate power, the need for better jobs and higher wages for Americans, the generational disaster that is our trade policy. It's all there, everything but build a wall. Sanders is often described as a 1970s-era socialist, and that's basically true. He honeymooned in the Soviet Union. He looks like he combs his hair with a balloon. But if you listen carefully, what Bernie Sanders was really selling in the last campaign was not Marxism, it was economic populism, and an awful lot of people agreed with it. Many of them wound up voting for Donald Trump in the general election. In case you've forgotten, here's what Bernie Sanders sounded like back then.
I am fighting to break up the large banks on Wall Street. But I do want the opportunity to tell them face to face what their greed and illegal behavior has done to this country. If Wall Street does not end its greed, we will end it for them.
Well, you could disagree about whether Wall Street and the big banks are really driving America's decline, like all politicians Sanders was and is an overstater. But looking back, there was something touchingly old-fashioned about the way Bernie Sanders ran that campaign. Sanders made no appeal at all to interest groups. He explicitly opposed interest groups. He instead talked about national unity and the people left behind. His first announcement speech did not mention the words racism or sexism or, for that matter, abortion or gun control. He said nothing about immigration or non-citizens. Sanders was running for Americans, all of them, whether you agreed with him or not. Needless to say, Sanders quickly found himself at war with Democrats. The modern Democratic Party has no place for the idea of nationhood. It rejects the existence of universal interests and values. Instead of a common American culture, Democrats see only tribes. Now, Bernie Sanders is pushing 80, and he seemed completely bewildered by these changes in attitude. In the weeks after the 2016 election, Sanders told one reporter that Hillary Clinton lost the race because, quote, "It's not good enough to say, I am a woman, vote for me." Well, Sanders was right, obviously, but he was way too late. Modern Democrats are defined by identity politics. That's the idea that the accident of your birth determines what you're worth, your value. Some groups are favored, others are blamed and punished. What matters isn't what you do, the choices that you make. What matters is who you are genetically. By the time Brett Kavanaugh was nominated to the Supreme Court 6 months ago, Democrats had made this entirely explicit.
Women across this nation should be outraged at what these white men senators are doing to this woman.
This is all gross strategizing from 11 old white men.
It's a white man strategy that is politically dumb, in my opinion.
These people in Congress right now, in that Senate Judiciary Committee, these white men, old, by the way, are not protecting women.
Old white men. Not a favored group in the modern Democratic Party, to put it mildly. And yet Bernie Sanders is undeniably all three of those things. So how do you win the nomination of a party that hates you for qualities you can't change? Bernie Sanders is not the only Democrat facing this dilemma, far from it, nor is he the only one to realize that there's really only one solution. You have to embrace identity politics. Getting woke is the only option. So Bernie Sanders has done just that. Here's a clip from his second presidential announcement video released today.
Our campaign is about transforming our country and creating a government based on the principles of economic, social, racial, and environmental justice. Our campaign is about redoubling our efforts to end racism, sexism, homophobia, religious bigotry, and all forms of discrimination.
So that's the new Bernie Sanders, and he seems a lot smaller than the old version. Instead of saving America from predatory global capitalism, Sanders plans to save us from Donald Trump's racism and sexism. Okay, let's say he does that. What then? Racism and sexism aren't actually the biggest problems that America faces. Sorry, not even close, actually. Growing economic stratification and a dying middle class, those are the biggest problems. But nobody in Washington wants to talk about those things, and why would they? People in Washington are richer than ever. Any change to the status quo is a threat to them by definition. It's much better for them to have the population squabble over unresolvable questions of identity. A nation that's arguing about skin color is not asking how a tiny group of people is now flying private while almost everybody else has gotten poorer. So identity politics is a tactic designed to prevent conversations dangerous to the ruling class, obviously. It's also a way for some of the most privileged people in America to recast themselves as victims. Cory Booker, for example.